All right. Well, we have lots to talk about, happy to say. So let's kick it off with a technical update. Ra, are you ready?
Yes, I am. Welcome to Community Update 213. So Dan Conley coached me over the weekend to say, just say the two main things that the team has accomplished in the last week before you go off into mainnet status and all of that. So I'm going to do that. I think it's maybe time efficient for somebody that just wants to listen to the beginning of this and and be productive. So the two main things that the team is working on, one is the release of this 0.13.0 release, which is single parent block merge testnet, end of this week. And then next week onwards, they work on finalization and multi-parent block merge will continue. So that's the getting all this 0.13.0 work done is the main focus for this week. The other is there is a web API version 1. So current API, as you can read here, it says it's under that /API endpoint. We're not putting any number with that, but then there is a new one that will be /API/v1 that comes with auto-generated OpenAPI schema that's accessible via OpenAPI. Initially, there's not much of a change between the two, but you can see there are some changes with what the current format field names are versus what the new format would be. Now, the /API endpoint, which is what everybody is using right now, will remain available for now. Eventually, it will be deprecated. So it's up to the folks to decide whether they want to start working with API v1 now, and then there will be a version 2 API in future that basically unifies the gRPC and HTTP API. So for now, gRPC has more functionality, HTTP has more functionality to help with the deployment of, with deploys basically. So that eventually will be, the full API will be available in future, that will be version 2. So I hope that's clear to folks. If you don't want to do anything, you don't have to do anything at the moment. But these are, at least this API v1 is a help towards helping you to migrate to future APIs, whether you choose to do it right now or you want to wait for a little time, it's up to you. So that's the, those are the two, sorry, go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, I think the, if you want to get the flow price, you have to use the new API. So I think people will be motivated to use the new one to get the flow price.
Yeah, yeah.
So I do have a question. The underlying implementations of gRPC and HTTP are somewhat different when it comes to data representation. Are we doing a least common denominator implementation there if we're merging those two standards, or
the version 2? Yeah, the version 2 API design is not complete yet. So right now I don't know the answer to that question, but those will be. That's basically a future task. So right now we're not focused on that yet. So when we get to that, we'll have more clarity on that. At this time we have the API v1, and the main focus really is the 0.13.0 version, getting it out this week on the testnet, end of this week, and then doing the next version of it that's multi-parent and includes the work on finalization, all of that. Okay. So that's kind of it.
That makes sense.
Having said that, now let me talk about the mainnet. So I said last week that we had 0.12.5 version on the testnet, and I think the mainnet will soon be updated to 0.12.5 because we didn't find any problems or issues with it while we were running on the testnet. And we expect that this O12.5 will be the last version of the current mainnet, unless some catastrophic issue or bug or whatever is discovered in the interim over the next several things. And after we're done with that, after we upgrade the mainnet to O12.5, there will be the O12.5 testnet available for a period of time. But really the focus would be that we really want the community to start testing the O13.0 version when it becomes available end of this week. That would be the that would be the one eventually will be promoted to well, that and any next versions that come, which is O13X, that will be coming over the next couple of weeks. Those are the ones that will be promoted eventually to the hard fork 2 version of the main net, and that will be the block merge mainnet. Okay, and I hope that that part is clear as to what the plan is there. So those are the main things. In terms of other work that is going on, the simulator testing framework is continuing to be improved for the block merge test cases. And then Dennis is looking into rolling the primitive operations to improve their performance. At the moment, he's basically trying to get the metrics and look at options and see if and how much metric improvement there is. So he's still in that stage of investigation at this point in time. And everybody is working on this O13.0 version at this point in time. And in addition, Will has been putting in some work into generating test snapshots from the mainnet to in preparation for the RPC airdrop. So to be able to basically have, what is the rev holdings of record that will be used for RPC airdrop. So he's been putting some time into that. And then work with other customers, external customers is continuing. And so those are the that's the main activity that's going on from the technical team. So we're very focused on getting this O13.0 out on the testnet. Now, there was a question in the community about, why not promote O13.0 to the mainnet, or will that be promoted to the mainnet? The thinking at this time is to say, it may be O13.0, it may be O13.1, whatever is available as a stable hard fork to block merge code towards the end of the month. That is the one that will be promoted to the mainnet. That's kind of what we're looking at. So whether exactly is that O13 or 0 or O13.1, we don't know yet, but whatever is stable at that point in time is what is going to be promoted to the mainnet. I think that's all I wanted to cover by and large. Any questions, any comments?
I have a question. When will we learn more about the RPC airdrop?
I'll be talking about that presently. I wanted to thank you, Rao, and I also want to extend my thanks to the dev team. They just work nonstop. They're heroes. So a big shout out to the dev team for all the hard work. So Jim, turning to your question, people will notice that the minutes of the board were published, and in the minutes there were 3 resolutions. So the board voted on three items. One was to finalize the equity and rev distribution for DAASL. The other, token distribution, not rev distribution. The other was to finalize the equity and token distribution for RPC, and the other was to extend or waive the payments requirements for co-op members for 2022. I will speak in general about the resolutions because they're cut of the same cloth. essentially 20% of the token holdings from each subsidiary goes to the co-op. So the RPC, 20% of the RPC token goes to the co-op, and 20% of the DAASL token goes to the co-op. And those are for RChain's ongoing and continued support for both of those networks. After that, there's a distribution of token and equity that is essentially your key stakeholder and employee pools. That's taken off of the 80%. And then the remaining tokens are split in a particular way. So we've talked about this before. So essentially 50% of the remaining pool goes back to the co-op in exchange for 3/5 of the equity. And then upon completion of the expected raises, a certain amount of those raises, 17.5%, goes back to the co-op again for support of the network and also support in the fundraising activities. Any questions about that?
I would wonder why the co-op gets more than half the equity in RPC.
Actually, co-op gets at the completion of the fundraising event, co-op does not have more than half. Co-op has 40% of the equity. Prior to that, unless or until there is an equity event, a purchase or an investment, it is right and fair that the co-op owns 100% of these subsidiaries since it started them.
Oh,
Right.
So Jim, basically, co-op will have 40% of the post funding. Co-op will have 40% of the equity and less than 50% of the token. Is how that the calculation ends up when you look at it, and then the members have the 10% of the token.
That makes sense. And then they get the 3/5. Well,
That's 60%. 3/5 is 60%. So 60% goes to the subsidiary in equity, and then the 40% equity stays with the co-op.
And that only happens on the on an actual investment event.
So I want to point out, if this isn't clear to everyone who's listening, the equity and the tokens are very different things. The tokens are for staking and other purposes. Equity is the actual ownership. For everybody who doesn't understand or who is maybe confused about the difference between the two, the transfer of tokens is not transfer of equity.
Right.
Jim, I want to correct myself. So the 40/60 that I'm saying is not exactly 40/60, because that 40/60 split is calculated after what is considered the key stakeholders or key employees percentage. So it'll be a little bit less than the 40/60.
Right.
Just so you know. Okay.
Right. And with the LCA structure, the investors and the board and the members of the co-op, of the RPC co-op or DAASL co-op, have a multi-governance. It's a combination of a co-op and an equity business.
That's correct. So it's a limited cooperative association. So you have both patron members, which are like the members of RChain Co-op, and you have investor members. And per Washington state requirements, it must be the case that the patron members essentially dominate in most decision-making processes.
And investments in RPC are going to bring in resources to RChain.
That's why we're doing this, yes.
So I have a question. It says as a support contract and finder's fee, if the investment is found outside of RChain, how do these numbers work out?
It doesn't change. All RChain's name is being used in all of this. So RChain is part of the reason that these will be found.
Jim was asking about the funds from RPC funneling into RChain. I just want to make sure people are aware what that ratio is of
But
funneling.
but that's not quite right, because we also get tokens.
We get token, yes.
Yes,
We already talked about the token. Yeah.
and
And we get to benefit in that the development that RPC is doing is going to make RChain much more mature
correct.
as a product, and
Oh yes.
peripheral value from their efforts in terms of the open source contribution.
Amongst other things, the overall model that people should be aware of is that RPC drives content to the network, right? RPC is all about self-sovereign data. So whether it's NFTs or it's the storage of healthcare records or anything else, RPC drives content to the network. Once you have content drives eyeballs to the network. So that is where DAASL comes in. Once you have eyeballs on the network, then you can start selling ads. So RPC and DAASL fit together in this way. Once you have both eyeballs and content, you will have transactions that involve multiple shards. Once you have transactions involving multiple shards, the rev becomes more valuable. So there's a virtuous ecosystem here that is being sort of shepherded into existence. I don't know what the right metaphor is here, but this is the aim is not just financial. The aim is to construct a virtuous ecosystem, so that everything begins to get on a path of lifting each other up.
And all of a sudden, we become scalable, infinitely with shards. So, we can really, we're not being overly selfish in being the authority, an authority for global consensus, but enabling an unlimited number of communities to use their own shards for their own purposes, whatever.
So, Jim, what you just said, that is a significant part of the RPC approach, is that we want people to spin up their own shards and do the communications.
Indeed. So we do have other things to talk about today. So if you would like to have a further conversation about RPC and DAASL and the consequences or the implications of these models, please join us in the closed door session. We have been talking about these models for at least 9 months. So we have alerted the membership at regular intervals as to what the board is thinking about. And this is why, in fact, the board has taken the vote, because we've gotten the feedback from various sectors of the membership. All right, moving on.
Greg, if I could just please, for anybody who has questions about the RPC token genesis and airdrop, next Wednesday, New York time at noon, there is a meeting that everyone is welcome to attend. So any RChain member, any RPC member that wishes to discuss RPC tokens and the airdrops, that's pretty much the meeting that you should attend next Wednesday, New York time at noon. Greg, do I have that right?
That's correct, yes.
So if you want to involve yourself, that's the meeting.
All right. Thank you, Bill. So RChain is going to be presenting on a panel at Metaweek in Dubai, beginning next week. So we're rapidly pulling all of our materials together, and I'm very excited about the participation in Metaweek. Our partners, Dunhill Bismarck, have graciously helped us make good contacts and are arranging for us to meet with a wide range of folks in Dubai, along with our other partners, Dex Ventures, and other folks that we know in the region. So it should be very productive for RChain. I think Darryl has some thoughts about the RChain and the Metaverse. So Darryl, did you want to speak to that?
Oh yeah, I'd love to. Thanks, Greg. So yeah, we've been scrambling to kind of get materials ready, and I'm just going to share my screen and show. I haven't shown this to anyone yet, like, well, a couple people, but like hardly anybody, nobody from the team. So this is all new for everyone, and it might actually be too late to actually get this poster printed up. But anyway, here it is. I'm curious to see what people think of it. So this is just me talking. This is not any kind of official statement from the co-op. But I believe personally that that RChain could play a very, very big role in the future of how metaverses evolve. And if you look at the one pager from the Metaweek conference that we're attending, I'll just read a quote from it. It says, "Inside a metaverse, users can share and store an unlimited amount of data, use self-sovereign IDs, play games, and earn and trade digital assets, create limitless digital art pieces, and play with NFTs and virtual goods, and launch marketplaces. You name it," end quote. So to create metaverses for these kinds of heavy data-centric transactions that require rapid results, we're going to need a layer 1 blockchain solution that can accommodate all this. The solutions can't rely on layer 2 technologies with hubs or roll-ups or parachains or the like. The wondrous demands that metaverses will require will only be solved by a base layer blockchain solution that has been built from the ground up to accommodate these needs. In addition, considering that the largest companies in the world are in a colossal race, spending billions of dollars secretively competing for the hardware and software solutions for the future of the metaverse, you're going to need a layer 1 blockchain platform that can actually scale as more load is put on the network. So I think this is the message that we can bring to Metaweek, that RChain could be a leader at solving the problems that metaverses are demanding solutions for. But I'd like to dig a bit deeper. I mean, that alone is an incredible thought. But if we dig deeper into RChain's vision towards bringing together coordination technologies that help solve some of the world's greatest problems, how that could be applied to the evolution of the metaverse. So RChain was built out of an open source social network project that had some audacious ambitions. Social networks will be moving to the metaverse in the coming years and will arguably have the potential to affect society's evolution. And because these are new worlds that humanity is building, the early architects of these worlds have the opportunity to affect the norms around how humans will interact with each other as the century unfolds. We could affect norms that encourage the importance of nurturing our meat space worlds, we used to call it back in the 90s, as we continually depend on virtual ones. We could create norms that involve social communities that foster collective intelligent decision-making, rather than amplify limbic system reactions around fear-based disinformation mobs. We could create worlds like Gene Roddenberry's Star Trek vision, as Greg has pointed out, where there's no money and no nations. Or we could create worlds like the early settlers in North America who treated the idea of property ownership as an absurd notion, and they flourished under gift economies. I mean, the potential is just crazy wild, right? So currently, in my opinion, the norms that are forming are less than ideal. Due to the smart contract technical limitations of current layer one blockchains, only the tiniest bits of data, like deeds of ownership, can find their way onto the blockchain. These limitations have led to rampant speculative money being thrown at the very few current use cases for smart contract-based layer one blockchain platforms. And that is DeFi, NFTs, and now the growing list of metaverses popping up every week. And the monetization of these metaverses is almost exclusively focused on the notion of virtual property ownership. Like North America's early pioneers, people are scrambling to stake their place in this new world with the visions of being mega rich landlords one day. I mean, who wouldn't want to spend 450 grand on snatching up the neighboring virtual property next to Snoop Dogg on the sandbox? Which is exactly what happened last week, I think it was. Someone spent 450 grand buying virtual property next to Snoop Dogg's virtual property on a metaverse called the Sandbox. So anyway, it's under this backdrop that I'm curious about what RChain's roles could be in what many are describing as the next evolution of the internet. How can we, as a collective group of humans, some of which among us are collective intelligence pioneers and early World Wide Web builders, how can we build architectures that help influence the norms towards the metaverse being a beneficial place for humanity during this crucial metaverse birth phase? So to me, that's what RChain could represent at Metaweek, is not only that we're the best layer one platform for putting data on, for example, but also because of what RChain represents as a cooperative. So that's my spiel.
Awesome stuff, Darryl. And, you know, we have to think outside the box a little bit, outside of RChain, in the, that, you know, different worlds, you know, we have all these worlds that are connected, and each one could be a shard in RChain.
Right.
Or interfaced. A shard could interface with some other existing meta world, perhaps. But you know, I guess the scaling and the fact that I'm sorry about that phone.
I just think it's endearing hearing an actual old school telephone.
Yeah, that's how it does. So, but the meta worlds, all, you know, will need also other layers. They'll need a peer-to-peer layer. A lot of the communication will not be on RChain. We need to, you know, part of what we're trying to do with RGov is build the structure of the user agent, the thing that obeys your rules that you program yourself, and could integrate AI with the user agent. You know, I think, you know, these aspects of the meta world we're creating are important.
Agreed. Thank you both for those perspectives. And I would love to hear from the community. You know, give it some thought as to what you think the blockchain role in the metaverse is, what you think RChain's role in the metaverse is. And you know, if you get your thoughts and opinions to us before Tuesday, then your comments and concerns may find its way into our presentation. With that, Darryl, are you ready to do the week in review?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Greg. So here's week in review for Thursday, February 24th to today, March 2nd. Last Thursday in the governance committee call, the monthly governance committee call now, the governance committee discussed the upcoming RPC snapshot schedule for March 11th and policy issues surrounding the RPC Rev airdrop. Also on Thursday in the work study, they did a review of rfile.ro directory implementation. On Friday in the climate coordination RCast, we started by discussing legal access to nature. sea ice extent at the poles, and Singapore's transformational green cities. And then we also discussed the metaverse, and Steve Ross Talbot shared a live stream of global temperature rise, which he proposed maybe we could stick on the front of the website. Let's see, on Monday in the Casper Stand-Up, this week's Casper Stand-Up covered conceptual frameworks for token supply management. In particular, they discussed 3 paradigms: 1, token as particle; 2, token as chemical; 3, token as organism. Also on Monday in the RDev member co-op planning, they did DEX project formation, Shamir keys for crowdfund access. They did an update of robot.net and bootstrapping DEX with trades on Agoric exchange, potentially. On Tuesday, in the communications working group, we discussed updating the ecosystem page on the website and devoted the rest of the time to coordinating materials for Metaweek. And this morning, in the RChain Active member hangout in Jim's room, Nate joined us and talked about Dan Larimer's latest project called Fractally. Jim and Bill had a discussion on potential cross-chain stuff with Agoric and Cosmos. And that brings us to now.
Thank you, Darryl. Any questions for Darryl about the week in review? All right, thank you. I want to say just a few quick words about this idea of token management and frameworks for thinking about token management. Before I make these comments, I want to be clear that these are not proposals for RChain specifically. These are observations about what is available to us for consideration when we think about token management. I don't think anyone here is laboring under the impression that currency is not going to be digital. Regardless of whether the underlying technology is blockchain or not, digital currency is the future. That's just a fact. We're already seeing the US government involved in several projects, actively involved in several projects for rolling out digital currency, as is the Chinese government, as are many European concerns. So currency will be software. And once currency is software, then there are many, many more degrees of freedom that we have available to us. I mean, the software engineers in the room know that we can basically make currency do anything. Even if we keep within tight constraints about sort of rational or sane use of currency. And in fact, I want to point out that rational and sane management of currency would suggest to us that we rely on existing scientific and mathematical disciplines as opposed to trying to invent things whole cloth. So if we consider sort of the age of physics versus the age of economics, physics wins. If we consider the age of biology versus or chemistry versus the age of economics, the traditional sciences win. And as a result, we should be turning to them for guidance about how to think about token supply and management. So the 3 different paradigms that I've outlined here have to do with what we think of in terms of the internal structure of what constitutes a token. So the particle view suggests that there is no meaningful interior structure to a token, which is more or less what has dominated our view of fiat currency. The only sort of aspects related to the physical internal structure of fiat currency that are salient have to do with making sure that every dollar has a serial number, every token has some kind of serial number which can allow them to be tracked so they're not counterfeited, and other kind of security measures. But by and large, tokens are fungible, right? Fiat currency is fungible. So the experiment that to understand fungibility, the experiment you want to keep in your mind is imagine a grocery store with at least two cash registers. If you, let's call them cash register A and cash register B. If you take a single dollar bill out of cash register A and a single dollar bill out of cash register B, and you put the one from B into A and the one from A into B, the till is the same at the end of the evening. Nothing has changed. You can't detect that swap from the point of view of the books of the grocery store. That's the notion of fungibility. And what it says is that there's nothing specific or internal about those dollar bills, even though the dollar bills have different serial numbers printed on them. So what that means is that when you're thinking about the dynamics of currency in the particle paradigm, all you can do is count them. That's their only, the API says you can count them. Now, obviously you can mint them, potentially you can destroy them, but there's nothing about the management that is interior or programmable from the point of view of the token itself. All supply management is exogenous to the token. Hopefully these concepts are making sense. If we move up to the chemical layer, oh, and by the way, I do want to point out that from a physics point of view, physics makes a very strong commitment about token supply, right? Physics adopts the conservation of matter and energy. So if we think of matter and energy as our tokens, right? Physics says you don't get to create them and you don't get to destroy them. You might be able to convert matter into energy or energy into matter, but at the end of the day, you don't get to create or destroy any of the token supply. It is fixed, and it is fixed for the entire life cycle of the universe. That's what standard model physics says about token supply. I'm being a little bit jokey here, but I think people understand the point. So then we could imagine that tokens have some kind of interior structure. So tokens are not devoid of interior structure, but that you could think of them as like some kind of data structure. So this is like chemistry. So hydrogen has an interior structure, oxygen has an interior structure, and there are rules about their structure, which allows for hydrogen and oxygen to combine, right? And when they combine in certain ratios, you get water. And water has its own interesting properties. Now, if we think about it, managing a supply of chemicals, whether you're a chemical plant or you're a print shop or any number of other institutions that manage these kinds of assets or these kinds of materials, being aware of their properties and aware that they have code that works inside them, regardless of whether you like it or not, right? So hydrogen and oxygen will react autonomously, right? We don't have to tell them to react. It's it derives from laws of physics that they undergo these kinds of transformations, and it has impact on the supply, right? So if you have a supply of hydrogen and you have a supply of oxygen, if for whatever reason they become mixed, you will have a supply of water. Anyone who's read The Martian will appreciate what this means when you're in less than healthy environments, or you're in very austere environments. But this kind of autonomous reaction, this kind of autonomous capability of the token itself, is a paradigm that not many people in the cryptocurrency or digital currency space have explored. But I recommend it to everyone because we know a lot about chemistry. We've had hundreds of years to learn about chemistry. The periodic table is a fantastic piece of software, and our understanding of chemistry is despite all its failings, it is remarkable, and we could do worse than to mimic chemistry in managing digital assets. Finally, also note before I move on that chemistry also observes the static supply, although it's not the static nature is at a different level. So your chemistry doesn't ever create or destroy elements, right? So hydrogen, by and large, doesn't stop being hydrogen. There are some caveats to that, but in sort of ordinary chemistry, not nuclear chemistry, but in ordinary chemistry, hydrogen, the count of hydrogen, even if it's bound up in water, has to remain fixed. The count of the oxygen molecules has to remain fixed, even if they're bound up in water or other kinds of chemical substances. However, if they are bound up in water, it takes work to get the hydrogen back out of the water, right? So there is a notion of supply management that is both endogenous to the token, but also creates different notions of scarcity and abundance that are not from the external manipulation of the market, right? So both the interaction of tokens and the interaction of the market with those tokens will create a rich set of dynamics. Now, this becomes important if you want to model things like supply chain, where you do have tire manufacturers and you have carburetor manufacturers and you have electronics manufacturers and so on and so forth. From the point of view of someone who's putting cars out on a lot, they know they don't have a car token unless they've spent 4 tire tokens, right? So you could think of the tires as like performing a particular chemical role. So there are a number of chemicals that go into making the car molecule. And when you have those chemicals in the right mix, then you will get the production of a car token that matches your actual car lot supply. And those kinds of supply chain management modeling and other sorts of modeling, across the industrial sector could be nicely met by having tokens that have interior structure that is akin to chemical structure. Hopefully that's making sense. And then moving on finally to the next layer, we have organism. And again, biology, we've been doing biology formally at least as long as we've been doing economics formally, and potentially longer. And we know for a fact that people have traded livestock. So it's not like the notion of having organism-based assets is an absurd one. In fact, it has been the basis for a lot of society for millennia. However, we also know that like chemistry, organisms have the ability to mingle and mix. And when they mingle and mix, they produce new copies of those organisms. So in this sense, even though maybe somewhere down at the bottom, there is still a conservation of matter and energy, up near the top where we're looking at things like apple groves and flocks of sheep, we are forced to live in a world where some years there are more apples and some years there are less apples because of the way we've husbanded the trees, or some year there are more lambs and other years there are less lambs because of the way we've husbanded the herd. And so in this regard, having tokens be able to reproduce gives yet another level of complexity when we think about management, token supply management. And again, I argue that having a certain amount of autonomy in the token itself, as opposed to only exogenous management, has lots and lots of advantages when we are thinking about a variety of supply chain and other kinds of problems, especially if we're thinking about having tokens model things like livestock or, supply of mice for laboratories, or even modeling entities like viruses or bacteria in the case of a global pandemic. So my point is, and I'll complete here. My point is that once currency becomes software, then we have lots of different ways we can organize that software. And there are some natural levels of complexity, particle, chemical, and animal, that give rise to different token supply management regimes. And there are existing scientific and mathematical frameworks that can give us guidance, as opposed to just trying to pull this out of our, out of the air, let's say. Hopefully this makes sense to folks, and I'll stop my soapbox here and see if there are any questions.
Well, to me, it's kind of fascinating, kind of contemplating this kind of color that can happen between the fungible and the non-fungible. So, and your way of kind of laying it out in with those kind of principles is really, really fascinating. In short, you blew my head off.
Cool.
Yeah, I guess I finally got what you were talking about there with, I was thinking more like our books with the meta currency, the message is the token, which is sort of atomic. But, now I'm thinking more along the lines of the graphical lambda calculus and chem lambda. And I was wondering how chem lambda might be a great visualization for the kind of thing you're talking about.
Yeah, exactly. That's precisely the point. Once you start to think about tokens as having interior structure, right? They can be substances, right? And we're very familiar with trading substances as assets, right? We have traded gold, but gold has electrical properties. We've traded bronze, but bronze has material value, material properties. It doesn't have to be that the assets that we trade have no internal property, structure, or utility. And in fact, what we're trying to get to is to this right relationship between asset structure and utility. That's what we're looking for. And the different internal, the internal complexity of the token gives rise to different management regimes. And rather than make them up, let's go look at how it's been done for billions of years, right? Chemistry is a very, very old proposition. Biology is a very, very old proposition. And we can just imitate that rather than trying to invent something whole cloth. All right. Any other questions, comments, concerns from the community?
It maps into simply the message is the program.
Yes. Yeah. Once you can think of programs as having autonomous agency, right? So part of the whole point of the blockchain infrastructure is that copying is no longer free, right? I mean, the issue between the physical world and the digital world is that in the digital world, we have this illusion that copying is free, right? Because there's nothing in most of the classical computation models that gives you a cost for copying. But in the physical world, copying is not free. So if I have an apple, if I eat it, it's gone. If I give my apple to you and you eat it, it's gone. And when I gave it to you, I don't have the apple anymore. if I have a picture, if I have a digital picture of the apple, and I make a digital copy of the picture of the apple, you get a copy and I get a copy, right? That's the difference between the digital world and the physical world. And the tools and techniques of the blockchain make it so that digital assets can behave more like physical assets, in the sense that copying is now hard, right? And copying can be prevented. Once it takes on that aspect, then you want to ask, are there benefits for it to take on other kinds of physical attributes, such as interior structure? So if it has this structure of sodium or the structure of chlorine, then you can combine it and get a new structure which has other interesting and useful properties. Awesome. Thank you all. Please stay safe, stay warm, and we will see you on the other side.